Just, quickly wanted to give you information on figures of speech. You tend to get questions on this once in a while in CAT RC, reading comprehension. But irrespective of whether there are questions on direct questions on figures of speech or not, good readers almost always tend to know how to understand these things. And I thought it doesn't take long. Okay, it's just 10-15 minutes at max, and it's a lesson for life, especially for people who are not used to reading literature, or not from convent school backgrounds in schools. In schools, generally, it's in ICSE, at least CBSE, it just gets taught around 9th, 10th standard. You tend to have an idea of this, or people who are from the humanities background. But otherwise, just pay a little attention. It's something that's going to be really useful. There are a lot of figures of speech, but I chose only a few of them, because these are the ones that you actually need to be able to interpret and understand, when you're reading passages. First of all, what is figures of speech? Please do not confuse figures of speech with parts of speech. Parts of speech is grammar. Parts of speech are nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, interjections. Those are like 8 minus 1 technically interjection. Nobody gives, cares about interjections, but technically 8 minus 1 parts of speech. That's grammar. Don't confuse that with figures of speech. Figures of speech is writing and literature. You would also have seen this word, if you're reading enough Aeon passages, you would have seen this word figuratively speaking. Okay, figuratively is the opposite of literally. Literally is a highly misused and also abused word in the modern day language. People say, I literally was there today, or I literally felt this. You can't literally feel something. Literally means what you say, the words are exactly what happened. That is literal. Okay, you take the word for their face value. That's called the literal usage of the word. So I am here, literally I am here. Okay, there you can use it, because what I say is the truth. Figuratively is when the words don't mean exactly what they say. Figurative usage means the words always mean something other than their natural meaning. Okay, that's the opposite of literal. So figuratively speaking means don't take the words that I'm using. Understand the what's behind it. A very good example. You will notice when people are sarcastic, for example, okay, what happens is what they say is actually not what they mean, right? They mean the opposite. Like sometimes when the students are pretty dull in my class, or they just don't read, I just say, wow, you people sound like geniuses today. It's like I'm not actually giving them a compliment, right? I'm actually insulting them. So figure of speech works like that. Figure of speech is a usage of words, or a set of words, or a phrase, or whatever expression, where you don't take the literal meaning of the word. You actually ask what else is behind that usage of word. Okay, so the most common ones are these. Okay, this list. Simile and metaphor, people tend to get this question a lot. To be honest, from a practical reading purpose, there's not much of a difference. In both simile and metaphor, object A is compared to object B. For example, my friend is like a cat, friend is object A, cat is object B. It's called a simile. Simile is basically low IQ metaphor, okay? Because simile is too direct. You have nothing to figure out. Object A is given to you, object B is given to you. You will generally see the usage of the word like or as. If it's a simile, similar, right? You will either see the word like, or you'll see the word as. It's mandated. This is as, this is as that. For example, when I compare two objects, so this is like that. This is as smooth as that. When I say smooth as butter, we say, right? So two objects are being compared directly. You have nothing to figure out. This is called a simile. Okay, this is one figure of speech. Metaphor is when object A is compared to object B, but object A is not mentioned. You talk about object A as if it is object B, and you assume that the reader will understand. For example, window of opportunity, right? You are talking about opportunity. So you're talking about, so what does mean window of opportunity is actually opening to a better life, something else. That something else is not mentioned. Okay, but you're talking about opportunity as if it's a window, or wings of freedom, we say, right? We are talking about an individual as if he or she is a bird. Only then you can have wings of freedom. So object is being compared to one other object, but that object is not directly mentioned. So metaphor is a slightly high IQ figure of speech, because you are trying to understand what whom the author is pointing to. So the comparison is, you're talking about one particular object as if it is another object. For example, we say some people are like home. Okay, simile. But if I say my friend is my home, or this particular person is my home, obviously the person does not become my home, right? Literally, but figuratively, what I'm trying to say is that's the person where I get the same comfort as someone gets when you are in your home, right? So you're talking about one thing as if it is something else. You expect the reader to understand that part. Okay, it's not that. So A is like B. You don't expect the reader to understand anything. You're just mentioning A and B. That's a simile. But metaphor. You are talking about A as if it's B, and you expect the reader to understand what is A and what is B. Okay, that's a metaphor. The third thing, the third important figure of speech is called analogy. Analogy is also a comparison, but think of it this way: simile and metaphor, they compare nouns. Okay, they compare objects, right? And analogy compares clauses. In other words, an analogy compares one idea with another idea. Okay, for example, watching ABC movie was like shooting myself and then waking up in the grave and shooting myself again. That is called an analogy, right? So I'm comparing one particular uh, action, which is watching a particular really bad movie, and I'm comparing it with another action. Obviously, I'm not going to shoot myself or shooting myself, but I'm comparing the pain. So I expect you to understand that this was as bad as this. Okay, so analogy is when in order to explain to you one particular situation. That's why analogy is also parallel reasoning. You sometimes get parallel reasoning questions in CAT that I've discussed in a previous video. So analogy, in order to explain one particular situation to you, I'm giving you a second simpler situation. So this situation is that like that situation. This object is like that object, simile. Directly talk about that object as if it's this object, metaphor. This situation is like that situation, analogy. Okay, watching Talaiva and Jailer was like floating in the skies, isn't it? So if you are a fan of Rajini, or if you, some of us South Indians are literally crazy about him and most of these movies, but the idea is, you understand the idea, right? So this particular action is like that particular action. So there is parallel reasoning in this action, that action. That is called an analogy. Okay, an analogy is basically an example to simplify something more complicated. Okay, that's called an analogy. The ana actually is a very interesting prefix. You would have seen it in anarchy. Okay, anonymous, for example, anomaly, for example. So watch out for, see, that's a very interesting way of learning good words. Always break down words and see if you've seen these prefixes in other words, and then you see if there is any common pattern. Okay, for example, ana is without. So analogy is without this, something else, some other example. Anarchy, without rule. Okay, anomaly, without this pattern. That's why it's a break from the pattern, right? So that's how analogies work. Okay, and the next two are very important, so please pay attention to this. Irony and paradox, the most important figures of speech in reading comprehension passages. Irony and paradox, in both cases you see contradictions. That's why people often tend to get confused between irony and paradox. Okay, because in both cases contradictions are involved. Okay, but the difference between irony and paradox, number one difference is irony is reality. Okay, negative reality. Paradox is not reality, it's an illusion. That's the first difference that you'll have to understand. In paradox, two things are happening. They cannot happen together, but it looks like they're happening together. That is called a paradox. Okay, for example, CAT aspirant scoring low after attempting more mocks. Why is it a paradox? Because when someone's giving quite a few mocks, you expect that person to actually get better. But it does happen. Okay, don't get confounded. But as you learn, sometimes your scores drop because you're not able to now get fluke marks. You're overanalyzing and thinking anything because you have everything, because you have more knowledge. But overanalyzing and overthinking sometimes actually brings down your marks. So then you'll have to go back again and understand where to stop overthinking, and how to answer questions where you draw a line as to how much overthinking should be done. So sometimes what happens when people study harder and learn better and they're getting better at the language, their scores actually dip a little bit. Okay, which is a very interesting paradox. So paradox is two things that are not supposed to happen together are happening together. That's called a paradox. Okay, so if there is a paradox in the passage, a very interesting question on that would generally be resolution of the paradox. Resolution of the paradox is the explanation that will help you understand why they are actually happening together. Okay, for example, the demand for a particular phone is high, but the quarterly sales of that phone are down. is a paradox. If demand is high, the sales should be upright. But then the resolution of the paradox is someone telling you, hey, the demand was high, but the phone was out of stock because there was some embargo on ships or whatever, and they couldn't bring the stock, and therefore they couldn't sell it in the stores, or there was a strike of dealers or whatever, they didn't sell it. So demand was high, but the sales were low. Now suddenly it's not a contradiction anymore, because you can see why, even though the demand was high, the sales went down. So that's called a paradox and a resolution of a paradox. Irony, on the other hand, is you expect A, okay, but you get B. And B is the opposite of A. So basically, there is incongruence, lack of matching or incompatibility between expectation. It's like the classic expectation reality meme, okay, if you are aware of it. For example, traffic cops are riding a bike, let's say, without wearing a helmet. That's ironical, because you expect them to follow the rules and then preach, and then preach what they practice what they preach. Or PhD students using ChatGPT, because these are going to be future professors. If they are using ChatGPT for their dissertations, they are copying, isn't it? So the people who are going to become teachers are actually copying in order to get in their journey to become teachers, which is ironical, because they're going to be like the one setting example for future students. So irony is when you expect A, but you get the opposite of it, which is B. Okay, if there's a B at exam, for example, teachers are copying in the exam itself. Okay, so that is called irony, because you expected A, you got the opposite of it, which is B. Irony is generally slightly humorous but negative. Okay, it's called drive it also. When you mention the irony, it's funny in a very tragic way. So irony is when there is reality, something has happened, but it's the opposite of the expectation, therefore it's irony. In paradox, you see two things which should not be happening together. It looks like they're happening together, but there's a resolution that tells you why they're happening together, if at all they're happening together. So that's the difference between irony and paradox. For example, to continue the same, to give you an idea of irony in this case, CAT aspirants scoring lower marks, even though they're studying more and they're attempting more mocks, is called a paradox. Because if you practice more and if you attempt more mocks, you're supposed to score better, not low. The irony in the similar situation will be students, and I've noticed this a lot because I'm in that profession, and we do get weekly score, numbers of how many people have attempted the exam or whatever. One of the things that confounds me absolutely is a lot of students bunk the mocks. Okay, it doesn't make sense. You paid for it. You paid for the mock series, or some of you are actually students, and then test series or whatnot, and then you don't attempt the exam. And then the classic reason I get from students is, hey, I want to finish my syllabus and then I'll give all the exams, which is the stupidest thing you can ever do, because there is a reason why mocks are spaced out. Okay, it's just poor logical thinking if you think you're going to give 3-4 mocks in 1 week towards the end of the exam. And there's no concept called finishing syllabus in CAT, first of all. Only quant has syllabus, first of all. Verbal and LR don't have syllabus. So if you're not, in order to finish quant syllabus, or in order to get better in verbal, if you're not giving mocks, what you're doing is you're not giving yourself a chance to learn from your mistakes in the exam, because the mocks are not just about testing yourself. The mocks are also about temperament, a lot of things. Can I sit in my one place for 2 hours without being restless? Do I get thirsty? Will my urinary bladder give way to suddenly break down every time I am under pressure? A lot of things can happen. Okay, do I lose my confidence in the middle of a particular question, or if I'm not doing well in verbal, does it affect my LR? These are all things that need to be understood as well. It's not just about finishing the syllabus and then giving all the marks, which is one of the stupidest things to do. So that's ironical, right? So you bought the test series, but you're not appearing for the mocks. You're preparing for CAT, but you're bunking classes, or you're bunking the mocks, isn't it? Even my YouTube channel is a classic example of irony, right? It's available for you for free, but most people don't actually watch the full video. It's just amazing, right? Someone's giving something to you for free. All I would do is just sit for 20 minutes and watch what the guy is babbling. I don't understand what is so important in your life that someone's teaching you for free, but you just can't do that, and you spend a lot of time on Instagram and this and whatnot. I won't get into preachy mode, but see, there's a sense of obsession that's sometimes needed. If you want to prepare well for CAT, give it your heart and soul, and then you can dream of going to great places. Don't be half-hearted, like they say. Don't half-ass things, because then you'll be neither here nor there. That obsession is very important. You should have that sense of, okay, Every piece of opportunity I have to learn something, I'll just learn. Anyway, so that's how irony and paradox works. Finally, you have euphemism and oxymorons. The word oxymoron itself is an oxymoron because oxys is wisdom, moron is stupid. So oxymoron is two words next to each other, which are opposites of each other. Two expressions which are opposites of each other, you get antiphrastic. That's also a figure of speech, but we don't get into those high-end figures. There are plenty of more figures of speech, actually, a lot of them, but you will not really be tested on those. But you need to know what's an oxymoron. Opposites, right? Loud silence, opposites of each other, or bright darkness, okay, or deafening silence. Deafening is something too loud, but silence, okay. Sometimes silence itself feels so loud that you're not able to tolerate it. So that's how oxymorons work. Two words next to each other which are opposites of each other. Euphemism is a nice way of saying something bad. For example, hey, you're not using your, it looks like you're using less of your brain today. Actually also has less of your brain today is also a figure of speech, right? Because brain here stands for intelligence per se. So I would want you to go and check out other figures of speech like synecdoche and litotes and stuff. You'll understand these kind of expressions. But less of your brain is not literally your brain, right? Brain stands for intelligence. Brain's a metaphor generally for intelligence. But instead of saying you sound stupid, I'll just say you seem to be using less of your brain. Or sometimes I do this with my friends. If my friends sound a little dumb or they're not able to catch, usually they catch and they don't catch, I'm like, do you need coffee? Okay, it's just like a euphemistic way of saying why are you talking so dumb today? Okay, so euphemism is a nicer way of saying something something bad. Okay, so when sometimes, for example, it happens, right, when you're like one of my friends, when he asked how do I look in this new shirt, you don't want to break his heart by saying you look stupid in the shirt or whatever. So we say it doesn't suit you. It's a euphemism, right? So also remember, EU is a positive prefix. In any word, EU brings some positivity. For example, eulogy. Eulogy is a positive speech you give at the funeral of a particular person, right? Again, don't give a eulogy to a person who's alive. Okay, it's only for a dead person or an object. You can write a eulogy. You can eulogize the Mount Everest, for example. Euphony, phone is sound. Euphony is sweet sound. EU is positive there also. Euthanasia, Thanos, god of death. Thanatos is death. Euthanasia is good death, mercy killing. Euthanasia, EU is also positive there. Euphoria, happy feeling, right? So EU is a positive prefix in all these words, you'll see. Anyway, so these are some of the most common figures of speech. Hopefully they clarified a few things for you. Until next time, peace out.